So today's session is on, well, we've called it Encountering Self in Nature. So you've probably realised now that as we learn about outer nature and become more sensitive to it, we become more sensitive to what's going on the inside as well. And that's for a lot of reasons. Partly it is just that developing sensitivity. Sometimes it's about, as we learn about principles, like living systems principles, we realise that they apply to us as well. But also it can be a little bit more kind of personal in terms of like, as we go into the process of connecting, we realise things that we're holding inside because we come face to face with the realisation that those things are what's called a block to us. For deepening connection. And sometimes that's a realization because you might think, oh, why am I finding this so hard? Oh, it's because I can't concentrate. Oh, okay, I'm realizing that maybe actually my mind is jumping around a lot and that's something that I'm aware of. But sometimes it's also like, oh, but I'm in this beautiful spot and why am I feeling really sad or really angry? And it doesn't really seem to make any sense because I've been having this great time and yet this is how I'm feeling. So there's also that energetic action of being in nature that will surface those things even before we're consciously aware of what's going on. So there's a few different pathways for coming to understand more about ourselves, and we're going to go a little bit more into that today. So just to mix up the exercises a little bit more now, there's a discussion question in your workbook on that first page of the Encountering Self in Nature section, which asks you, what types of skills, qualities, or capacities can you see nature helping you develop from what you've experienced so far? Oh, and also the bit that I missed around how do we learn about ourselves in nature is also the fact, and I think I mentioned this yesterday or made the point that nature's the ideal training ground for us as well. So because of those reasons, like that we become more sensitive, we're able to really work on some of the most fundamental like human capacities, things that we often talk about in like leadership courses. Oh, to be a good leader, you need to have empathy, for example. And being in nature really makes us able to work on these skills in a very subtle kind of way. So to use the example of empathy, the things that you need to feel empathy are you need sensitivity. You need to be able to really feel what this other, in normal circumstances, it's a person, but with nature, it's not a person. So it takes a little bit more nuance to be able to try to understand what is the experience of this being. And I think that came up with someone's sharing yesterday. So other skills that we could develop, and we have been developing already, is our ability to be present. Of course, we need to practice mindfulness quite a lot. We also like, you know how we've been practicing using our awareness in different ways, the open versus a very narrow focus, and some of you have really enjoyed that. As I mentioned, like that's associated with different states of brainwaves and functioning of our minds, and our ability to shift between those different modes of operating helps develop like a flexibility or a pliability in our cognition as well. So it makes it more easy for like when you're doing your work to be able to move into an expansive like creative frame of mind and then move very quickly into a focused, very narrow kind of frame of reference or focus. So we're doing these things with our body and with our senses that are correlating with sort of higher order, or what we normally think of as higher order functions, but whatever we're doing with ourselves when we're practicing just purely on a sensory awareness point of view, that's making a big difference to what's happening with our minds. Of course, we need to practice listening when we're in nature in a very different way. So it's not just the listening to the sounds like we did with the listening meditation, but also, and I think we probably know that when we listen to people, we're not just listening for words, we're also listening to try to listen at a deeper level. Sometimes it's body language, but there's also like trying to listen for the deeper meaning that someone is communicating to us, but they might not be putting into words, and trying to get a feeling, like a feeling kind of listening as well as just the words. And when we're in nature, when we're trying to find that really still, sensitive place, we're developing those skills for listening at the same time. So lots of different ways that we're developing ourselves personally in quite like practical ways through being in nature, because it's what we're designed for. So when we're in nature, for our neurobiology, for our functioning, it's how we're meant to be, and that's going to make working with ourselves in different ways easier. I even have a whole training program now that's just based on this, developing different capacities in nature, because once I started thinking about it, I was like, yeah, you can like work on literally anything and do it in a way that's like, this is a fun, like conducive sandbox for us to play in, and we're doing it without feeling self-conscious from having other humans around as well. Cool. So back to that question. If you can have a think about what your answer to that question will be, and then we're going to break out into small groups so you can have a bit of time learning from each other as well. So yeah, answer the question, what types of skills, qualities or capacities that you can see so far nature helping you develop, which doesn't need to mean like, okay, I've mastered that already, but your sense of what you feel like you're going to improve at if you kept up this practice of being in nature. And for the purpose of your group discussion, have a little think about what makes you think that. Like what's happened in your solos so far that's helped you understand that this is something that I'm developing now, whether that's, I can listen better because I'm more sensitive, or I can think more clearly because I can still my mind. I've found that I get lots of creativity or inspiration because when I'm in nature, I naturally think in a more broad kind of way.